We're going to do a video here of what's in the National Plumbing Code. So this is just a quick code review. So let's just jump right into it. National Plumbing Code. So this is just starting from the very start. We're going to go to the end, except for T1 to T7. So preface. So this code is adopted by provinces and territorial governments. The legislation may include, so legislation is obviously laws, may include the adoption of the National Plumbing Code without change or with modification to suit local needs. So you can't change this plumbing code and the rules in here, but you can modify it to suit your local needs. Hence, we have a BC Plumbing Code. The next part, the National Plumbing Code sets out technical provisions for design and installation of the new plumbing code system. So obviously they're constantly updating it. It also applies to extension, altercation, renewal, repair, and of the existing plumbing systems. So this National 2010 code obviously precedes the 2005 code. The National Plumbing Code 2010 focus on safety, health, and protection of buildings and facilities from water and sewer damage. So I've gone through this paragraph and it says it doesn't have a code for every single thing you can think of. It doesn't include all codes here. It just includes the ones they want regulated. Okay, so and this code is minimum. They're saying that this is like minimum practice for what you're installing. This is minimum requirements and minimum standards. This paragraph is saying that we can have an input as plumbers to help determine the content. So users of the plumbing code can help determine the content. This is saying, this paragraph right here finishes here, and it's saying that the National Plumbing Code is a model. It is not a textbook. It is well researched by educated people. This is saying that the code does not manufacture products. It just makes criteria for them. So that is the National Plumbing Code of 2010. We're talking about code development now. So code development. The National Plumbing Code, so who develops it? It's volunteers from across the country. Who are they? They are members of CCBFC, and it includes builders, engineers, skilled trade workers, architects, building owners, and building operators. So CCBFC is advised on a scope. So what's the scope that they have to cover is regulation of buildings, fire safety, and plumbing in their jurisdiction. Okay, and then there's also PTPACC, and they are made up through its provinces and territories, and the CCBFC works through the PTPACC to engage in every phase of the code of the development process. So these CCBFC work through PTPACC and they develop the code. Okay, so this is code development. And then there's also the National Research Council, and they are periodic. They do periodic revisions to the code and address pressing issues. So what else about code development? The broader code user community also makes significant contribution. So that's us. How do we do that? We submit requests for change. Okay. CCBFC takes into consideration the advice received from the provinces and territory as well as the code user comments. Okay, so code requirements. So a requirement for a code would include health, safety, protection from buildings, from facilities, protection from buildings and facilities, protection for buildings, facilities, from water and sewer damage. Okay, so that's code requirements of that's what's gonna this is encompassed in the code requirements. So safety and health, that's obviously protecting our vents, right? And then when we get into dealing with proposed change or additions for code requirements, these are the issues that they're going to consider. Okay, so if you want to read through that, that's fine. Objective-based code format. So we have an objective-based code format here, meaning like this code is organized in objective-based. So what does that mean? Well, we have an objective. The whole objective to all this plumbing is to do it in a safe and health, it doesn't have any health risks associated with it. So the whole code is, the objective is health and safety, right? So now we've put that into, we've numbered it. We've given Division B is going to have sentences and pictures describing these objectives, right, for health and safety. So that's what we're talking about. So let's go ahead and read it. The National Plumbing Code, this is actually really interesting. National Plumbing Code was published in an objective-based code format for the first time in 2005. So it's kind of our first code for the objective-based format. So it's not that old, right? This was the result of 10 years of work on an initiative that arose out of the strategic plan adopted by Canadian Commission. So these guys came up with this plan. It was strategic, and it took 10 years of work to come up with this objective-based code format. So the NPC, the National Plumbing Code, compromises of 3 divisions: Division A, Division B, Division C, which we can kind of see on the right hand of the screen here. A more complete description of this division-based structure is included in the section entitled Structure of Objective-Based Codes. Okay, and we'll be browsing over that page. For Division B, it has a structure of information, how it's going to give it to you. It's going to have one or more objectives. So the objective is obviously health and safety. If we put this into English, stop saying health and safety, and we start saying venting. So it has one or more objectives to venting, right? As well as it's going to have one or more functional statements. So it's going to have a statement with it. So this is specifying it's for Division B. It's going to have one or more objectives such as health and safety, which the individual requirements help address, and it's going to have one or more functional statements. So statements on the functions of the plumbing system that a particular requirement helps to achieve. Okay, objective. So the objective of this objective-based code format is, this is kind of interesting, is the overall goals that NPC requirements are intended to achieve. So we have goals that we want to achieve, and we're going to do that through National Plumbing Code requirements, but that doesn't seem like enough information for this sentence. So they serve to define the boundaries. So we're not going to read this last sentence. So we would just read over this one more time. The objective describes in very broad terms. So what's the objective? The objective always is like health and safety. So if we want to have a floor drain right here, we got to vent it properly, right? So the objective describe in very broad terms. So objective, health and safety, venting properly. So if I say we have to vent our plumbing systems properly no matter how we do it, that's a very broad statement, right? So the objectives describe in very broad terms the overall goals the NPC requirements are intended to achieve. So, and they serve to define the boundaries of the subject areas of the code addresses. So we're going to have boundaries on our objectives. However, the code does not deal with all the issues that might be considered to fall within these boundaries. Meaning, if you're going to be creative, you come up with stuff. We don't have codes for everything everybody's going to come up with, nor keeping up with the changes as well is going to be a long task. So the objectives describe undesirable situation and their consequences, which the code aims to avoid occurring in the plumbing system. So basically, we're just trying to avoid undesirable situations and their consequences, right? So Yeah, we're going to come across things that are unacceptable risk, well as acceptable risks, and limits of probability, right? So we're going to see that functional statements in the code describe conditions in the plumbing system that help satisfy the objective. So functional statements may describe a function of the plumbing system that serves to achieve more than one objective. Intent statements. So these are statements explain the basic thinking behind each code. So this is our intention. This is what we intend to do. We're going to explain that to you, okay? Yeah, those are going to be highlighted with functional statements. They're going to have functional statements to tell you what they intend, right? Application statements are whether it does or does not apply, whether you can or can't do it. So with all this additional information, objectives and functional intent and application statements, it is intended to facilitate the implementation of the code. So we're just here to facilitate it, as well as we want some flexibility in the code too. So how do you do that? Well, the person seeking to propose a new method or material not described in the code will be able to use the added information to understand an expected level of performance. Okay. The structure of objective-based code. Now, this is kind of what we were talking about. So it's Division A, Division B, Division C, and the relationship between Division A and Division B. Additional information. So this code is obviously numbered and with numeric values. We have 2.1, 2.7, right? We got different sections. 2.5 for venting, right? So it's going to be numbered. Also, there's going to be a change indication from the 2005 edition when we're dealing with 2010. They're going to put a vertical slash. A vertical line has been added in the margin next to the affected provision. Okay, so when we change something from 2005 to 2010, we're going to indicate that with a slash in the margin. Meanings of and or. We're not going to read that. You can go ahead and read that if you want. Administration and metric conversions. So metric conversions to imperial, they've actually added a little table for us at the end, because all values in the National Plumbing Code other than nominal size, so 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, are given in metric units. So everything's given in metric units except for a nominal size of our pipe, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. The relationship of the National Plumbing Code to standards development and conformity assessment. So it's kind of like hoobity wada. So the relationship of the National Plumbing Code to standards development. So standards development, we understand that. Standards being developed. Conformity assessment. So let's just kind of jog over that for a sec. Conformity. So you have to conform. You have to pass a test, right? So it has to conform. Your plumbing has to conform to these codes. And they're going to be assessed, right? So assessed is obviously we're talking about an inspector. So relationship of the National Plumbing Code to standards development and conformity assessment. The development of many provisions in the National Plumbing Code are supported by members, okay? There's going to be several members of the organizations of Canada's National Standards System, and that's the NSS. And the NSS is a federation of accredited organizations concerned with standards development, certification, testing, and inspection. So all these guys do is test. They just test stuff, and it kind of seems like they're in a lab or something like that. So this is a committee, and this generally, so Canadian standards generally means substantial majority agreement. So we have an agreement of a committee compromising of balance of producer. So this is like the people that are going to use the project. So we've come to an agreement, and we've thought about the producer, the user, the general interest members, and the consideration of all negative comments to make Canadian standards. So then that leaves the question, what are non-Canadian standards? Non-Canadian standards are things we've adopted from America. Conformity assessment. So the NPC, National Plumbing Code, establishes measures either within its own text or that of reference standards. However, the National Plumbing Code does not deal with the question of who is responsible for assessing conformity to the means. So conformity assessment is going to be established by your governing legislation. So your city is going to have a third-party guy who is a plumber who's interested in assessing the conformity of the code. So that's going to be your inspector. So it's the governing legislation's responsibility to hire an inspector to make sure that we're conforming with this code. So for testing, so who are these guys that come up with the testing standards? It's almost 400 organizations that are accredited. And if you want to read about them and more about that, you can. Certification. So these guys also come up with certification, the NSS, and it's going to be confirmation like that your product or service meets a requirement. So then you're going to get a certification mark if you're talking about piping, or you're going to get a certificate that your product works and you can plumb with it, right? Evaluation. The evaluation, the product will perform its intended function. Qualification, the ability of the product to perform its intended function. Okay, moving right along here. So this is just section division A, B, and C of this code. It's going to go over a little bit of explanation of what they are, and then terms and abbreviation. So it says non-defined terms here. They're just basically saying words that are like English words that we're not going to define for you. So for everybody that isn't a native English speaker, you know, you won't find some of the definitions in here just because they're considered just regular lingo. So sorry about if you can't find a definition in the code, you know. So general application of this code. This code applies to design, installation, extension, altercation, renewal, and repair of the plumbing systems. So what are the plumbing systems? The drainage system, venting system, water service pipes, and water distribution systems. So compliance. Compliance with this code shall be achieved by complying with the applicable acceptable solutions in Division B. So this is kind of a hidden gem, right? They're telling you, look, there's actually acceptable solutions in Division B. So we're going to give you a couple tricks and a couple tips in Division B. Using alternate solutions as well, that will achieve at least the minimum level of performance required by Division B in the areas defined by objectives, functional statements attributed to the applicable acceptable solutions. So what are they saying there is there's going to be alternative solutions. So if you're getting creative and you want to come up with at least a minimum level of performance required by Division B, you're going to find a couple different ways to do it, or we're going to try to help facilitate solutions for you in Division B with alternative solutions. So that's kind of a hidden gem, you know what I mean? Material system and equipment must possess the necessary characteristics and free from defects, right? Use material and equipment, so it shall not be reused unless the requirements of the code for new materials and equipment are satisfied. Okay, so you kind of can't just throw whatever you want in your systems. We're saying, yeah. So this is the definitions. Obviously, we have to know this. That's a must. That's stuff we have to know. Conflicting requirements. In case of conflict, kind of refer to right here. So what are we talking about when we're talking about conflict in the code? We'll get into that in a sec. We're just going to go over this quickly. So the application and objectives. So the objective is obviously always health and safety for venting properly, putting in a proper plumbing system, right? Making sure that your occupants are healthy and safe, that they're not going to have a health risk posed. So the application of the objectives are the plumbing systems covered in this code. So yeah, so our objective is the plumbing systems covered in this code. So the objectives are always, so we recognize this from occupational health and safety. When we're talking about objectives too, we're always talking about health and safety. So objective is going to be safety, is going to be fire safety. Actually, if you read the building code, like a lot of it is based around fire safety. Structural safety, right? You want kids to be able to kind of climb all over your plumbing stuff. Like, honestly, it's you want to put it in safe, right? Safety and use, there you go. Health, indoor conditions. So what are indoor conditions? Just not exposing people to inadequate air quality, obviously, meaning don't bring sewer gas up into the building or whatever. Don't expose your customers to sewer gas. An objective is also going to be sanitation, as well as hazardous substances containment. So we talk about acid waste in a laboratory, we have to have like 50 millimeters trap seal, right? That's going to be an objective for health and safety. Protection of building or facility from water and sewage damage. So that's also going to be something. So this is kind of the section where we flip over, and I was saying it's like a minute or two to flip over. So we're going to do that. Functional statements. So this is what's in a functional statement. This is what makes up a functional statement. Okay. This is kind of the basis for having a functional statement. It has to require these things. You want to make a salad, you need these things, right? So that's those things. Okay, it's the lettuce and tomato. Okay, so we were talking about getting into being creative with the code and using Division B. So we have like code compliance via acceptable solutions. So in case your acceptable solutions is kind of saying like do something illegal, and you want to know whether the code takes precedence or the acceptable solutions take precedence, or you want to know how the code works with acceptable solutions, that's going to be explained in this section, as well as code compliance via alternative solutions, okay? So this is still, we're talking about explanatory material, so we're going to talk about the level of performance for a second and how that kind of has a relationship with these guys. So level of performance, obviously choose the best level of performance when you got a couple different options, a couple different ways to plumb something. Obviously read the code to learn the preferred technique to hook it up, or preferred method. So they're actually, if you start reading the code, there's preferred methods on how to hook things up. Even though the code, like you think about it, the code is a book on a minimum standard and a minimum way to plumb things, but it's still written by humans. You know what I mean? Humans got a heart. They're going to tell you, look, this is the best way, how to do it, how to hook things up, and a preferred method, right? So there's actually going to be hidden gems in these preferred methods. You learn in alternative solutions, acceptable solutions, and reading the functional statements in Division B, right? Auxiliary water supply. You should probably read that over if you're a junior foreman, you're a foreman, you're a journeyman, or you're just generally interested. Auxiliary water supply is a good thing to know. It's a secondary supply of water, but I'm not going to define that for you. You can read it. Clear water waste. So what is clear water waste? So that's anything from a cooler, discharges from a drinking fountain, cooling jacket, air conditioner, or relief valve outlet is going to be clear water waste. Okay. We got a couple cool pictures here. Back siphonage preventer. Nice little picture. Another nice little picture. I like this part of this picture for some reason. Don't ask me why. I just kind of always look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's cool. We got the definition anomaly vertical. That's kind of a bit of a gem. I always go over the apprentices with that. 45 degrees and more is going to be vertical. 44 degrees and less is going to be nominally horizontal, right? We got this is actually, you start to read the code. You start to learn whether you're working with sanitary, sewer, water. This is how we want your offsets done, right? So take a little boo over that. I always show the apprentices this drawing. Sure, we all remember it. That's some more advanced guys. So kind of a cool drawing. Just take a boo over again. Then we get into reference documents. So terms and abbreviations, terms not defined, again, English, symbols and other abbreviations. Let's take a look at those. What are those? ASME, ASTM, AWWA, okay? That's kind of cool. Let's skip over it to show you, as that's the purpose of this video, right? just kind of show you that the code's not that intimidating. We get into our part 2 here, okay? Now this is the section we said we are going to do another video on. So let's kind of skip over to that. Let's do it thorough though, okay? There's 2.7, there's 2.8. So this is functional statements, okay? We keep skipping over the functional statements and get into explanatory material. So this is objectives and functional statements attributed to acceptable solutions. So you might want to browse over that. Combined building drains, talking about that, you might want to browse over that. We get into our division B of our pictures explaining the code, so we'll do that in different code lesson. And then at the very end of all this, we get to our division C. So terms not defined again. Administrative provisions. Your drawings need location and size of every building drain as well as cleanout. So these are your things your drawings have to have, right? And then we get into explanatory material. You might want to read over that. Then we get into the index and we're done the book. This is our chart as promised by the code. So pretty easy, eh?